Welcome back, my friends, to the show that someday will probably end. This is Austin Kokel's Music Hotel. I say welcome back, but this is actually episode 1. Our last video that we put up on YouTube was episode 0, which was kind of an introduction and telling you a little bit about me and, you know, getting to know each other a little bit. This time is our first true bit of content about music and festivals and things like that. So this is our true episode 1. As I mentioned last time, it's a very no-frills podcast sort of approach to vlogging, really just you and me just hanging out and talking, and really probably more me talking than you, but of course welcome you to say whatever you want in the comments. You'll probably see cameos from my cats, and if they happen to hop into my lap, we will just keep rolling, because that's the kind of podcast, video blog this is gonna be. It's really just no frills, just, you know, two friends chatting about music, so I hope you find something of use in it. But this time out, on this stormy weekend day here at home base, we are talking about Cruise to the Edge 2022, if you can see my shirt, so no surprise there. As of this recording, I've been back for just about 2 weeks from the cruise, and full disclosure, I did contract COVID-19 on the cruise. I'll be honest, I don't really travel well when I go to most anywhere, but specifically Prog festivals. I always end up having a cold or some kind of stomach ailment or something. So I 100% thought I had just a cold. I used my voice so much the first couple of days that I just thought my throat was sore from that, and I thought nasal drip and all that fun stuff was just a result of that. So if you do hear me cough or occasionally have to stop to catch my breath, I am now 18 days out from my first symptoms. I've been negative for over a week now. I've been non-contagious for well over a week. But I'm still having some respiratory problems, surprisingly. So it's a shame that, you know, 2 years out in the world, not taking a break from work or anything. I was out there the whole time during lockdown and everything because my job considered me essential personnel. I didn't get it. I was super careful. I'm vaccinated and everything. And unfortunately, when I finally go on vacation, that's when I get it. So I'm still getting over it. But you know, I'm about 95% okay at this point. So that said, you know, a lot of people came back from the cruise with it, but I think, and I really am going to try to keep this apolitical, because somehow medicine has become a political thing, but I think the vaccine has really helped. I think my case, if I had gotten it 2 years ago, would have been much worse than it was now that I've been vaccinated and boosted. And I think that's the same for a lot of people from the cruise. Everyone had to be vaccinated, and everyone, you know, was as careful as we could be. And I think a lot of people have been okay, relatively speaking. But enough about that. I really don't want to talk about COVID in this video. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about Cruise to the Edge. So if you watched episode 0, I said that this is going to be a very no frills, just sort of you and me chatting kind of approach to things. Very minimal editing. Very, you know, just a chat. So that's going to be the case with Cruise to the Edge. I'll have some videos and some photos of some of my experiences popping up throughout. But really, I just want to give you my first-person perspective experience with Cruise to the Edge, because that's all I can really give you. The beautiful thing about it is it's a different thing for everyone. You can go as hardcore with it as you want, or you can kind of just, you know, sit back and enjoy and take it easy and have a good time if you want as well. And I've kind of done it both ways. In 2015, that was my first Cruise to the Edge. I went in November of 15, and I went with 2 friends, and we bunked together and had a great time. And we did that together to kind of keep our costs down. And I said the only thing missing from this is my wife. We were still relatively newlyweds at that point. We'd only been married for a year. And she's been to Morsefest in 2016 with me. We saw the premiere of Snow with Spock's Beard together. She's been to dozens and dozens of concerts with me at this point, and she really is sort of my, you know, where we go arm in arm to these festivals and shows and everything, and it's great. So to have done Cruise to the Edge without her was just kind of a sad thing. She was really the only thing that could have made it better. So for years, I've been looking to get back, and I've wanted to take her with me this whole time, and finally we made it happen. We were planning on seeing Transatlantic at Morsefest, because after being a fan of Transatlantic for 21 years, I've been with them since SMPTE or SMPTE in 2000. I've been following them that long. I've never seen them because they hit the major cities. They hit Chicago and LA and New York and Philadelphia and everything. And I've never lived near any of those. So it's always been very difficult for me to see them. And, but I have everything they've done in Tilburg and everywhere else on DVD and Blu-ray. So I said, no matter what I do in my life, I have to see Transatlantic someday. They were, after Alice Cooper, which if you know I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, Transatlantic became the top of my bucket list. So we were going to go to Cross Plains, Tennessee to see them at Morsefest. And to be perfectly honest, we wanted to do VIP, but the VIP prices were pretty expensive this time around. And we did some number crunching and figured out that we could do Cruise to the Edge and see 30 bands and still see Transatlantic at least once for the same price as it would be to do Transatlantic VIP for Morsefest. So that's ultimately what we did. We made the decision to go on Cruise to the Edge and see a whole bunch of bands that I love in addition to Transatlantic. So we went and we had a great time, and I'm glad we did because it worked out that way. We saw all of those bands. Transatlantic put on a great show. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. And long story short, I got to bring my wife on the cruise with me, and whereas I went very hardcore into the music in 2015, this time she and I promised each other that I would be there for her as much as the music. So this time was a slightly different experience than my 2015. In 2015, we got off at Key West. We docked at Key West, and we went to Nassau in the Bahamas. That was an unexpected trip. We were supposed to go to a private island and be water taxied out there. And by the way, you can probably hear the thunderstorms already beginning here. We didn't end up going to the private island because the water taxis, it was just too choppy to get us there. So we instead went to Nassau a day later. There was too much that I wanted to see that day for me to get off of the ship. So I stayed on the ship and I watched all the shows I wanted to see. So really I only got off in Key West in 2015, and I tried to find the Ernest Hemingway Museum, got lost, ended up in the bad part of town, circled back around and got back on the ship and kind of lost 2 hours to not really do a whole lot in Key West. So really that trip was much more about the music than anything else that time. This time, I said that I'm going to get off at the private islands we're going to have some fun. We rented a beach lounger for two at one of the stops. We rented snorkeling equipment at one of the other stops, and we booked a shore excursion to see the swimming pigs also on day 5 at Perfect Day at Coco Key in the Bahamas. So we made a point to get off of the ship this time. So, and each night I went to bed a little bit earlier than I did on the first cruise. We went at it pretty intensely in 2015, my friends and I. There were times I was up until 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and my roommates would come in even later and wake me up when I was already just barely falling asleep. So I made a promise to actually get some rest and get out earlier this time. So this is, like I said, going to be my perspective of Cruise to the Edge. There are people who saw 44 shows. I probably saw a dozen, maybe even less. I don't really quite remember. I've never counted because I didn't really want to know that definitive number. But I was satisfied ultimately with what I saw for the most part. There were some that I really, really wanted to see that were in my top tier that I wasn't able to see due to scheduling problems or production delays. And it is what it is. You just have to live with it. That is the thing about Cruise to the Edge. You can tailor it to what you want it to be as much as possible, but ultimately there's only so much you can control. So all of that prefacing aside, let's get to the actual cruise. So day 1, we had some production delays. It wasn't as bad as 2015 where we had production delays pretty much throughout the entire cruise. We really just suffered on day 1, and then from day 2 onwards, it was pretty much perfect. Day 1, we had all sorts of COVID protocols to follow in advance. We had to get a negative test result within 48 hours of embarkation. We had to be vaccinated, and then on the morning of embarkation, we needed to answer questions through the Royal Caribbean app about our health status. And that information would then be automatically imported to their iPads at the port terminal, and it would be a breeze to walk us through the process, and we get on the ship and go. Unfortunately, because of technical problems with those iPads that they were going to use for that, we ended up going pen and paper, so everything took significantly longer. It was just kind of a cluster all around, and as a result, the guests got on the ship late, artists got on the ship late, merch got on the ship late, gear got on the ship late. It was just all of the cascading delays from there on out, which was a real shame. So day 1, the very first band I wanted to see, McStein and Miniman, with Randy McStein, Marco Miniman, Nick DiVirgilio, and Mohini Day, they were supposed to start at 2 o'clock. They did not start until 6 o'clock on the first day. I didn't think we were going to get to see them at all, to be perfectly honest. In 2015, a great band that I love, who unfortunately called it quits a number of years ago, Messenger, was supposed to be the first show at 2 o'clock or 2:30 on day 1 of 2015. That show never even happened. I thought that was going to be the case with McStein and Miniman. We ended up waiting in a stairwell, which the line zigzagged up the stairwell for about 5 decks on the ship. We waited and waited for 2 hours for the show to start. We finally gave up at 4 o'clock because it was just, we couldn't wait anymore. We had other things to do, and you know, I'm friends with people in that band, and I felt terrible that I had to bow out, but you know, eventually just, it is what it is. Excuse me, COVID cough still lingering. So we instead tended to some other business. We went to the merch table, we got into our room because due to another snafu, we ended up physically carrying our own luggage onto the ship, which was pretty difficult and kind of set the tone for the first day as well. So it's thunderstruck on a Sunday afternoon. So we got to take care of those things, and we ended up going back towards the line a little while later, and the line was moving, and all of a sudden McStein and Miniman was starting at 6 o'clock. So we got in there, and we actually saw about 3/4 of the show, which was amazing. So unfortunately I didn't get to see all of it, which was a huge disappointment to me. I'm a friend of Randy McStein's, and he's a friend of mine, and I really wanted to be there to support him. I even had my Randy McStein shirt on, and couldn't quite be there for the whole set. But I was up in the balcony, got some good shots, and we'll take a look at some of that right now. So there's McStein and Miniman. I got to see one of the things that I was really hoping to see on the cruise, which was Mohini Day and Marco Miniman doing their Kokel duo, which is an Indian sort of rhythm. It's a vocal, syllabic thing. I don't quite know. Marco Miniman has a video where he explains it better than I could. And it's really cool getting to see them put that thing together where they're perfectly in sync. Mohini does it with the vocal part, and then she switches over to her bass for it. It's just super cool that that got incorporated into the show. Randy was amazing the whole time. It was really cool seeing him be a front man. Seeing Nick DiVirgilio doing drum duets with Marco was incredible. And seeing Nick DiVirgilio be a side man, handling keys and backing vocals and acoustic guitar and electric guitar. It was really cool seeing him, do some different stuff like he might have during the Spock's Beard 2.0 days. So excellent show. I believe I don't know if they're going to tour. I know they've got some live shows lined up in the future. And if you can see McStein and Miniman, absolutely do it. So after that, we headed to dinner, and then Transatlantic, the band that I was there to see, of course, was delayed by a good hour and a half, I believe. They went on at about 8:30 at night, and I stood in line for a good hour to see that show, and it was worth it. I didn't know what the seating arrangement would be in the theater, but I made sure to get there in plenty of time so I could, there wouldn't be any hiccups. I wouldn't possibly miss any of the show. And we got there, we saw the whole show. I was, as you'll see in the upcoming video, I was basically the best seats in the balcony, audience left, stage right, and got some points from the stage from Portnoy for air drumming and everything. And that's always fun. And Neil Morse and I exchanged some glances. So I have the Transatlantic Kaleidoscope Media book from 2014 that I've been trying to get signed since 2016. And COVID cough, told you. I had it at Morse Fest in 2016, had it signed by Neil Morse, Rich Mauser, and Ted Leonard, because we had all the members of Spock's Beard there, so Ted was there. And of course, as you know, he's the 5th member of Transatlantic these days. So that took care of most of the American side. 2018, I saw Mike Portnoy with Sons of Apollo in North Carolina, had it signed there. So that took care of the entire American side, the entire North American side of things. That still left Royna Stolt and Pete Travis and Daniel Gildenlow, if I could ever meet Daniel. And if you know the lineup from Cruise to the Edge 2022, basically all of those people, I believe, actually, yeah, all of those people were on the ship. So I just needed to find Pete and Royna and Daniel at some point. Did he find them? Who knows? We'll just have to watch and find out. But I did find Royna. He just walked right up to me before the Transatlantic Red Laminate show, and I happened to have the media book with me, and I said, oh, hey, Royna, would you mind signing this real quick? So he took care of that. So that was 1 down, 2 to go. So that was excellent. Got in there, and Transatlantic was playing 2 different sets on the ship. They were playing a medley sort of best of, including a good bit of the Whirlwind, because at Morse Fest they played the Whirlwind one night and the Absolute Universe the other night. And then the Blue Transatlantic show was all of the Absolute Universe in its entirety, which is pretty cool as well. But being a 20-plus year Transatlantic fan and never having seen them live, I was glad that they did the medley show for my show, because that was pretty much everything I would want to see. Granted, seeing shortened versions of some of the songs, such as Stranger in Your Soul and Duel with the Devil, it would be great to see the full versions of those, but that's not possible in an hour to 2 hour setting. But fantastic show. Unfortunately started late because of the production delays. I believe it didn't start until 8:30 at night. So that was a good, 2-hour delay, which kept in line with the whole theme of the first day. I really wanted to see Pain of Salvation on the pool stage that night at about 10 o'clock. And because of Transatlantic now running late, I didn't get a great spot for Pain of Salvation, but I did catch the second half of their show. I could basically see the top of Daniel Gildenloaf's head and Vikram's head. Shout out to my buddy Vikram Shankar, by the way, who is from Lux Terminus and Redemption, who was brought out as the touring keyboardist for Pain of Salvation for this tour. And I could see Johan Hallgren pretty well. Couldn't see Leo, the drummer, at all from my position. But better something than nothing. Like I said, sometimes you just have to adapt with how things are on Cruise to the Edge. So that was the end of day one. So day two was a lot better and also kind of worse in some regards. Again, you just have to be adaptable on Cruise to the Edge and understand that sometimes things won't go your way. So the day started at 11:30, at least musically for me. I got out there for Marbin on the pool stage and was right up front. Marbin being a fantastic jazz, fusion, saxophone-oriented, guitar-oriented, gypsy jazz, Israeli jazz band, now residing in the Chicago area, originally mostly from Israel. And I've become friends with those guys over the years, and it was great to finally meet them all for the first time. Our first exposure to them was actually before we embarked, before we boarded the ship on day one. We saw them. They'll just play their instruments anywhere for anyone. We were sitting in the parking garage waiting for our turn to board, and I heard the distinct sounds of gypsy jazz wafting through the air, and looked over the railing of the second story of the parking garage where we were, and sure enough, there was Marbin below us, as you see here, playing for the ship staff.
Told you they'd play everywhere. I hope Danny brought enough trucker hats. I want a trucker hat. It reminds me, I gotta put my wrist strap on my phone case. Yeah, Marvin! Woo!
So that was the first time I saw them, and I ran into some of the guys before their set, and excitedly, like I said, ran up front, had a perfect view, pretty loud sound for their set, but enjoyed it greatly. Got to see a whole bunch of brand new material from their new album, Dirty Horse, which is out probably now, I'm guessing. By the time you watch this, it probably will be out. So definitely a fun band. If you're not hardcore into prog, if you like some other genres and just enjoy just top-notch musicianship, Marbin, Danny Markovich-Schlor, Danny Rabin, and John Nadel and Everett Benton, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of their names. Fantastic four-piece. You have to check them out. So we caught them first after breakfast, and this was our at sea day, so it was nothing but music pretty much all day. We wanted to go see the photo experience with Alan Parsons specifically, because when else can you get the chance to get your picture taken with Alan Parsons? And the line was insanely long for that, and I should have predicted that, but I couldn't have predicted that long of a line. So we went over to get in line for the Flower Kings playing in Studio B, another one of my top-notch, top-tier bands to see. And the line for that was insanely long as well, because they were about the only things happening on the ship at that point. So everyone was there to see those things. We gave up on standing at the back of the extended line for the Flower Kings, ran back over to the photo experience for Alan Parsons, hoping we could get into the tail end of that, and were told it had closed, and we just barely missed the end of it. Ran back to the Flower Kings. They were letting everyone in, and it was, I believe, the only show happening, and there was not even standing room. We came into Studio B, which is a closed-off ice skating rink normally, where they do ice shows on the ship, which that's got to be really weird being on a moving ship and having to ice skate, but people do it. So we walked all the way around the entire room. There was nothing. We just walked out. There was nowhere to even stand and watch, nowhere to stand and listen, nowhere to sit and listen. We walked out. They were still letting in probably another 100 people after us, and there wasn't even room for us at that point. So unfortunately, I missed the Flower Kings first set, and it kills me to say that, but that's how it goes. So, you know, I just kind of swallowed that pill and said that for the rest of the cruise, now that I know the situation in Studio B, I'm going to make sure to get there early and get a good spot. And the bands that I definitely want to see, Pain of Salvation, the Flower Kings, make sure to get a good spot. So we left the Flower Kings and went over to the Star Lounge and said, let's get a good spot for Pattern Seeking Animals. Some of my past work experience, I used to be informally associated with Spock's Beard. Unofficially, I was part of their street team. I worked with my friend Sonia Kuksinovich Hill, and also apologies if I pronounce her name incorrectly. I've never heard it spoken out loud, so sorry, Sonia, if I pronounce your name wrong. But she was once known as Spock's Babe, and we became fast friends, and she asked me to help her out with street team duties back around the time that the Oblivion Particle came out in 2015. And so I know all the guys from Spock's and have become friends with them over the years. So Pattern Seeking Animals, having current Spock's Beard members, Dave Maros and Ted Leonard, as well as former member Jimmy Keegan, it's a very Spock's-based band. For this, they were joined by Walter Eno on multi-instruments and backing vocals, and Dennis Atlas on keys and backing vocals. Band leader and composer John Bejold did not participate in any of the live shows. They had their live debut at Rozfest, and he was not there for that. And he was not there for Cruise to the Edge. I think it's just his personal preference to not perform live with the band. That said, they just released a brand new album a couple of months ago, March of 22, Only Passing Through, which is just fantastic. And they played some of that on the ship. And we got a great spot. We talked about rescuing cats with Dave Maros and his wife, because my wife and I have done some work with cat rescue and fostering kittens in the past, so that was fun. We had a nice swanky couch right up front, sat with my former cruise cabin mates, and enjoyed that tremendously. And great set. The guys are always just very humorous and very fun to be around. They sound checked with classic Kansas and I think Journey, and the actual Pattern Seeking Animals content was top notch. They played my favorite from Prehensile Tales. They played Soon But Not Today, where Dave Maros does this perfect like Paul McCartney-esque bass fill at the end. And it was really, that was one of my tear-jerk moments of the whole cruise, was seeing them perform that song. So Pattern Seeking Animals, very, very happy to have gotten to see them live, and one of their very first shows in the history of the band. If you don't know them, they're hugely prolific, and Prehensile Tales was my #1 album of 2020. So fantastic stuff. If you like Spock's Beard, if you like Ted with Enchant, by all means, check them out. So night 2 got a little tricky and a little interesting. So spoiled for choice. I mean, there was Al Di Meola, there was Adrian Belew, there was Fernando Perdomo, so many great artists to see that night. Riverside, Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues. It's another example of how do you choose on Cruise to the Edge. Justin Hayward actually overlapped with the Blue Laminate show for Marillion, so they actually moved Marillion up by half an hour and moved Justin Hayward back by half an hour, so fans of both could see both. it was just a strange way of making things happen, and you never know how things are going to shake out. For me personally, I wanted to see Justin Hayward and didn't end up doing it because of wanting to get good spots for the shows that I cared about that night. Fernando Perdomo. I'm trying to get better at pronouncing his name. I call him Fern because that's just easiest. But I try to be respectful of the way he wants his name pronounced. And I very Anglo white guy pronounce it for a long time. I always just called him Fernando Perdomo. But I'm trying to say it more like Fernando Perdomo. So Fern just smack me upside the head if I ever say it wrong. But he was performing with his Out to Sea band, who I saw at ProgJect in 2018 at about 2:30 in the morning. And we rocked out with him and Joe Denenzone from Joe Denenzone and Stratusfurious. And that was an excellent show then. So I wanted to catch Fernando with his Out to Sea 4 album coming out. So that was a great band. A lot of band members that he has known for many, many years. Several of whom I didn't really know, to be honest with you. I know Joe Cass from Total Mass Retain, the Yes tribute band, was in there. And Fern had a percussionist with him. It was a really cool, fun band he had put together. And Fern paid tribute to the great Peter Banks of Yes and Flash fame, and actually was presented with Peter's signature red cap at the show. You'll see that in a picture here. And just a fantastic, celebration of everything that Fern has accomplished since I saw him first on Cruise to the Edge 2015 with Dave Kerzner. So that was an outstanding show that I caught in the Star Lounge. And I sort of set up camp in there because I wanted to see Gabriel Agudo, probably well known for his time with the band Bad Dreams, but I would say best known for his time with Steve Rothery, the lead vocalist of the Steve Rothery Band, and then also in his time with Dave Kerzner's In Continuum project, where he's the lead vocalist and basically the main character of that concept album. So Gabriel's a good friend of mine as well, and I've supported his crowdfunding for his New Life album, and this was the celebration and debut of a lot of those songs. So we got to see that with Bill Hubauer, who actually is from the area where I went to college up in Pennsylvania. So Bill was on keys, and it was always cool to see him. I got to chat with him and his wife for a little bit. And Dave Bainbridge of Life Signs and Iona, and his own solo works as well. Saw him on keys and guitars, I believe, definitely guitars. And then Joe Cass also on drums, and Fernando playing bass. He basically played lead bass, and it was some of the loudest bass mix that I've heard since seeing Englagord in 2015 on Cruise to the Edge. But it was a lot of fun just seeing him up there with a Fender and sunglasses, just rocking out. And then Gabriel, of course, the man himself, on guitars and lead vocals throughout the entire set. So that was how I rounded out night 2, and went to bed early and got an early rise for the next morning, which was day 3, where we made landfall. That sounds awful. Where we docked in Labadie, Haiti. And it wasn't an island per se, or, the section we were on was not an island. It's more of just a tip of Haiti. And, but it's a closed off private section that only we had access to for the day. So that was a lot of fun. And we'll take a look at some photos from there here. So we got off the ship at Labadie and had a great day there. Just a beautiful beach, very rocky beach. I live near the beach here in South Carolina, and I've seen some rocky beaches, but nothing like that. And it was a really cool older area. Coco Key, where we ended up on day 5, is a privately owned Royal Caribbean island and is very modern and done up and very pristine. And Labadie feels like it's been lived in and kind of an older place. And it was really cool. And we got to see a lot of the local flavor there. And obviously it was a very sanitized version, very Disney-fied version of things, but it was still cool to see some of the dancing and music and things like that as we disembarked the ship. So after lunch, which the cool thing was there were buffets on the islands and everything, or on our dock days. So we got to have lunch and, just did the typical hot dogs, hamburgers, and corn on the cob and everything, and got back on the ship. Our friends in Marbin performed on land as well that day. We kind of got a quick start getting off of land. We got an early start and then an early leave back onto the ship because we wanted to be there for the photo session with Riverside and Clone and Pattern Seeking Animals. I knew it was up there somewhere. And of course, Pattern Seeking Animals, as I mentioned, I go way back with the Spock's Beard family, so that was cool to get a photo with them. Clone, if you haven't listened to them, very cool, modern, heavier prog sound from France. And if you like bands like Pain of Salvation and Riverside and Haken and things like that, kind of the heavier, kind of more inside out kind of bands, Clone is definitely worth checking out. So we got a picture with them, with Pattern Seeking Animals, and then with Riverside, who go back a long ways with our friends in the band Jolly. And if you don't know Jolly, please, please, please check them out. I've been a big fan for 11, 12 years now, and they've been so important in my life. So my wife and I both wore our Jolly shirts to go get our pictures taken with Riverside. Riverside and Jolly have toured together before multiple times. They've been on Progressive Nation at Sea before together. They just go way back. So it was really cool for both of us to wear Jolly shirts and Marius and the guys to recognize that and go, "Hey, Jolly," as we stepped up to say hi to them. So a lot of fun getting to see them. And we also wanted to then head to the Transatlantic Q&A so I could continue trying to get my media book signed. And unfortunately, that got moved to 9 o'clock at night. Again, you got to be flexible on Cruise to the Edge. So we went up to the Viking Lounge where that was supposed to happen, and just ended up sitting up there and drinking a couple of pina coladas instead of listening to a Transatlantic Q&A. So we ended up in the Viking Lounge having our pina coladas and just kind of enjoyed watching Jane get her premonition from up above, and just took a moment, basically, at that point. Sometimes if something gets canceled or moved, you just take a moment, you go explore the ship, you go look at the rock climbing wall, you take some pictures over Labadee. You just enjoy being where you are. I found that a lot of people don't really just take the time to be in the moment on Cruise to the Edge. They're either just getting video or they're just like chasing people down or whatever. And I mean, to each their own, that's fine. But sometimes I just like to stop and appreciate the scenery of where I am and just enjoy a nice quiet moment with my wife, So that's kind of what we did. And then we prepared for one of our main events, our second headliner show of the cruise, which was Marillion. They played all of An Hour Before It's Dark and a couple of encore pieces. An Hour Before It's Dark has done very well for the band. A lot of people have loved it. They had a very aggressive marketing campaign, especially in London, putting artwork, wraparound designs on, iconic London taxis and all kinds of things. And it's a good album. I like it. A lot of people like it more than Fear. Fuck Everyone and Run. Did he say fuck on a YouTube video? He did. I actually like Fear more than An Hour Before It's Dark. They're both good albums, but An Hour Before It's Dark feels a little safe to me. And I'll also be honest, even Steve Hogarth, H himself, said he really didn't want to write about the pandemic, lockdown, things like that, but he just kind of felt like it was what he needed to talk about. So I understand that. I'm just really tired of hearing about lockdown, COVID, whatever in my music. It's, I understand it's something we've all lived through and it's something that should be remembered and, is a worldwide thing, and I understand. But just as a music fan, like Big Big Train has sung about it. Marius from Riverside has done a series called Lockdown Spaces or something like that. And then Marillion to sing about it. It's too much for me. I'm ready to get back to other topics in my music. I appreciate how much music has been put out during the pandemic, but I'm ready to return to more mundane or fantastical subject matter and not just misery and woe all around the world. That's my personal take on it. So a lot of An Hour Before It's Dark kind of centers on the state of the world. So escapism is very important to me, and that's not an escape. So it's a great album. It's very melodic. It's very, enjoyable, especially Care and Sierra Leone. Some very powerful moments, especially on the second half of that album. But it wasn't my favorite Marillion show I've ever seen. Like I said, I just like Fear a little bit more. I felt like The Leavers and El Dorado and songs from that album were a little more up my alley. So I was glad that I saw them in North Carolina when I got the chance back in 2018, the same weekend that I saw Sons of Apollo that I mentioned earlier on. 2 nights in a row. That was a really... Sons of Apollo one night and Marillion the next night, and not being on a ship, that's pretty amazing. But I digress. So we saw Marillion, excellent show. H is always an astounding frontman. And that was basically it for my experience with Marillion. I saw Steve Rothery a few other times throughout the ship. I ran into Pete after the transatlantic Q&A, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but I didn't get to see Marillion a whole lot. I saw H in 2015 on that cruise to the Edge when I first became a fan of Marillion, and we shared a nice moment together. One of the coolest things I've ever experienced, actually. Maybe I'll tell you about that in another video. But I didn't run into him this time, and that was, I don't know, I was kind of sad. I would have liked to have seen him again. But that was it for Marillion for that night. So afterwards, we went to dinner and had a nice, longer dinner. And we went to the main dining room for that one, met some very nice people. They actually seat you with groups. It's all group dining. So since we were just a couple, we ended up seated with 6 other people who we did not know. And that was a lot of the ship. There's a lot of small talk with a lot of people that you don't know. And that's part of why my voice got so hoarse and is still so hoarse. It can make for a really long 5 days of just chat. But we had a wonderful meal. I had probably one of the best steaks I've ever had in my life in that meal. And then we skedaddled on out of there to attend Riverside's Q&A and also the rescheduled transatlantic Q&A from earlier in the day. So those were both at the Royal Promenade, which is sort of the boardwalk down the whole ship. It's actually a really cool area, probably one of my favorite parts of the ship, maybe my favorite part of the ship. And while there, we attended Riverside's Q&A. I got a great spot right up front. I asked Marius from Riverside about his song, The Old Peace, with Steven Wilson. Asked about everything that went into that. And he told me that basically he and Steven Wilson just worked completely remotely on it. He wrote the song for the most part. I mean, Alec wrote all the lyrics. It was actually a poem, and he's no longer with us. So this was done as a tribute to him. If you don't know the song, it was available by donation only, and I believe never sold again in any other form. So you can probably find it on parts of the internet. I'm not going to endorse that, but it's a great song. It's Marius and Steven Wilson singing in harmony. Beautiful, beautiful song. So I was glad that that popped into my head to ask about. But Marius wrote the music for it and did his vocals. Steven Wilson basically just replaced Marius's voice with his own in some parts and did some overlapping harmonies, and boom, that was it. They just like cranked this thing out, and it's a gorgeous song. The Old Peace is the name of that one. So from there, I got to talk with Marius a little bit. We got to talk about my friend Assad. So shout out to Assad, who is actually out on the road at the Pineapple Thief right now, and was just out on the road with Riverside before that, and he would have been on Cruise to the Edge as well, but had to go out with the Pineapple Thief, which, oh darn, that's such a sad state. But I talked to Marius about knowing him and knowing Jolly, and got to chat a little bit, which is always fun to do with people whose music you respect and people you'd like to chat with a little bit. So I kept that same spot for Transatlantic and went to Transatlantic's Q&A immediately afterwards. It was like a huge crowd around that, to be honest with you. I asked 2 questions over the course of this. I actually was put on the spot from Roy Avon from the Prog Report and Inside Out. he asked me right off the bat if I had any questions, which I guess that's what I got for coming up with a good question for Riverside, is to just be put on the spot for Transatlantic. I asked them basically what things were like when Transatlantic decided to come back together before the whirlwind after the 7-ish year hiatus, when Neil Morse decided to leave secular music behind and just focus on his solo career after he left Spock's Beard. You know, I told them they didn't have to answer that if they didn't want to, if it was too heavy or if they didn't want to get that in depth with things. And basically Mike Portnoy said in this email between him and Neil Morse, Neil pitched a few ideas. He said, well, we could do this for the next album. We could do that for the next album. And, you know, after this whole long email, he said, you know, it'd be cool if we did another Transatlantic album someday. And Mike Portnoy is like, you buried the lead, Neil. So that was the germination of Transatlantic coming back, was just like an offhanded comment about it from Neil in an email. And then they came back. They've been back ever since and have done 3 more albums since then. So thank goodness for that one line in that one email. My other question was why they didn't do any cover songs with the Absolute Universe. If you know Transatlantic, they've always been big into cover songs. If you know Neil Morrison, Mike Portnoy, and Randy George, you know they've always been really big into cover songs. On Simpty, they did Procol Harum's In Held 'Twas in I, In Held 'Twas I can never remember the name of that. But it's, you know, Procol Harum's longest song, I believe. And they did that on Simpty. Bridge Across Forever, they covered Shine On You Crazy Diamond by Pink Floyd. The Whirlwind, they had several covers, including A Salty Dog by Procol Harum, Can't Get It Out of My Head by ELO, Soul Sacrifice by Santana, and then with Kaleidoscope, they had even more covers. They did Nights in White Satin and You and I by Yes. So a lot of, Sylvia by Focus. So I actually thanked the guys for getting me into Focus and for getting me into Procol Harum through their music. And I asked them why there were no covers with the Absolute Universe. And the short version of the answer I gave was like, what, 2 hours of music wasn't enough for you? Which I said, yeah, you're right, sorry. But basically they said that, you know, they did enough in their sessions for the Absolute Universe. And they said they did all they could do. And when they were done, there was no time for covers. So those are my questions for the Absolute Universe. Before that, I had run into Daniel Gildenlow from Pain of Salvation, by the way. He signed my entire Pain of Salvation discography, except for the album Falling Home, which ironically I left at home because I forgot it. And he also signed both the Flower Kings box sets that I have from his time with the Flower Kings, and he signed my Transatlantic media book. So that just left Pete. I was able to just barely snag Pete afterwards, hand him the media book, and he quickly scribbled on it. So as you see in the photos, my media book is now signed by Mike Portnoy, Neil Morse, Pete Trewavas, Royna Stolt, Ted Leonard, Daniel Gildenlow, and Rich Mauser. It's basically, unless you got like Chris Carmichael in there who plays strings with Transatlantic, it's pretty much everybody you could possibly want from Transatlantic to sign an album. So, especially because Daniel Gildenlow appears on that one, or Daniel Gildenlow, I believe is how you pronounce his name. But very important item in my personal collection, so I was very glad to finally have that signed. So that really just left the last show of that night, which it was another tough call for me. It was Haken versus the Zappa band, Frank Zappa alumni, including Mike Keneally and Marco Miniman on drums. I love Haken, don't get me wrong, but I'm about to see them with Symphony X on tour, and I've known that. I've had my tickets since day one. So again, with Cruise to the Edge, you have to decide, do I want to see a band I've seen many times before and I'm about to see again that I love, or do I want to see Frank Zappa alumni who I will never ever have the chance to see ever again? So I went with the Frank Zappa alumni. I love Haken, but I'll see them soon, and it is what it is. Fantastic set. They opened with Zombie Wolf. They played a lot of the songs that, well, it was all songs that don't involve Frank being the front man, you know, or singing lead, or, you know, typical Frank Zappa shenanigans. which doesn't leave a lot to be played, unfortunately. It just goes to show you that Frank Zappa was really the main attraction in that band. He surrounded himself with fantastic players. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Ray White and Scott Tunes and Steve Vai and Terry Bozzio and Eddie Jobson and I could go on and on and on about Frank Zappa alumni. But Frank was the show. He made it a show. He was almost like a game show host a lot of the time. If you watch, any of the Halloween shows or Baby Snakes or anything like that, it was all Frank running things. So to have Zappa alumni playing without him, it was a lot of fun, and I was jamming along and I was singing along where I could. But it felt like seeing Yes without Chris Squire or something like that. It was just, there was a huge presence missing from the stage. But a lot of fun. I was very thankful that they got added, and that was how we ended up night capping night 3 of day 3 of Cruise to the Edge. Unfortunately, by that point, I was really starting to feel kind of crummy. I thought my cold was setting in. Now I know it was COVID. So I apologize to everyone I came in contact from that point onward, but I had no idea. So I went to bed early that night and got ready for day 4, our next day out at sea. So just a side note, a couple of things I forgot to mention earlier on. Day 1, in between McStein and Inneman, or actually no, before McStein and Miniman, because we stepped out of line, we went to Studio B and we saw Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, which, how do you forget that? Goblin is awesome. If you don't know Goblin, they originated in the 1970s. They're an Italian prog band, and they first got their notoriety by scoring films for Italian horror movie director Dario Argento. And they did the movie Suspiria and other works back in those days. And Suspiria is probably the best known thing they've done. And but they've gone on to do a whole bunch of different things since then. There are like 6 different versions of Goblin currently in existence, and Claudio Simonetti's is probably the most famous. So I wore my Goblin shirt on the cruise and everything. I'm not a huge fan. I'm still actually kind of getting into them, but I like what I hear. Some of it can be pretty dissonant and pretty intense. I mean, it's Italian progressive styled rock that was the score for a horror film, so what do you expect? But they were good live. I watched about half their set and enjoyed it greatly. They have a very animated bassist with bright pink hair, purplish pinkish hair, who just really kind of commands the stage, and then Claudio Simonetti himself on keyboards, and just a lot of fun seeing them. The other thing I wanted to mention too is when we got into Port Canaveral, the night before we embarked, there was the pre-party featuring Alan Hewitt and One Nation and dueling pianos, and most notably for me, the band ProgJect, featuring Ryo Okamoto on keyboards, Matt Dorsey on bass, and of course Michael Sadler, the frontman of Saga, on lead vocals, Mike Keneally, who I just mentioned on the Zappa band, on guitars, and then founding member Jonathan Mover on drums. And they were a lot of fun. They pretty much played most of the things you could want to hear from them, and they could have played hours and hours on end. Great show. And a lot of people suspect that might have been where we all caught COVID in the first place, because that room was jam-packed with everybody going on the cruise pretty much. But big shout out to Ryo Okamoto and my friends in that band for putting on a great show for us before we even got on the cruise. So another thing I wanted to mention is some of the special moments on Cruise to the Edge that you can't really predict. My wife and I would inevitably walk by the Cafe Promenade along the Royal Promenade pretty much every single night. And 3 different nights in a row, we saw Marbin jamming in there with various people. First night, I believe it was just Danny and Danny from Marbin on sax and acoustic guitar. We walked by another time, and Nick DiVirgilio was in there, and he was playing utensils drums on the table. A friend of his, or maybe somebody from the crowd, I don't know who, brought him a napkin holder to use as like a ride cymbal. And he jammed. He did a little solo on the table and stomping his feet for kick drums. And then another time we walked by, Joe Denonzone from Dave Kerzner's all-star prog band, and Joe Denonzone and Stratusfurious was playing, fiddle with them, which is cool because he has electric for on stage, but he still had his classic acoustic violin for playing here. And another time, John, the bass player from Marvin, was there with his bandmates. So I walked by 4 different times. Oh, and then another night, my wife and I sat in with them, and I sat there and ate pizza while Marvin serenaded my wife about the lights in Alabama or something like that. Dan, you'll have to remind me what song that was. But you just can't plan for these kinds of special little things. And there are a lot of special little moments like that happened, where I just happened to walk by Rob Rutz during the Jane Getter Premonition Q&A, and I said, "Hey, Rob," because we live near each other and we know each other, and he put me on the spot asking a question to Adam Holzman, who's played with everybody from Miles Davis to Steven Wilson. What do you say? So, just some really special moments that I had, and those are the moments that I look forward to the most. I might enjoy those more than I even enjoy the shows, but sometimes it's kind of like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. You can have an impromptu snowball fight one time, but you can't have an impromptu snowball fight a second time, because then it's not really so impromptu. So you just got to wait for these moments to happen and just enjoy them. So that takes us to day 4, our next day at sea, and actually a pretty jam-packed day. I had my Transatlantic Media book signed. I had my Pain of Salvation discography signed. I was about to get my Flower Kings discography signed by Roina, which I'm not a big autograph hunter per se, but I mean, these are like the top tier musicians of my world on this ship this year, especially. So you have to, believe that this is my only chance to get certain things signed, unless I wanted to put together arrangements to mail things off to Sweden or the UK or whatever. So I hunted some autographs, unfortunately, and I forgoed getting some photos with some people whose music I really admire in favor of getting these signatures. But, you can't have it all. Despite what the band Lobate Scarp says, where you do have it all. So we first attended the Transatlantic photo session with the Zappa band, Transatlantic, and Haken. Got to meet a bunch of musicians who I really am passionate about one more time. And I wore my favorite flowery Roina Stolt shirt to the to the Transatlantic photo session, so that was fun. And afterwards was where I bumped into Roina Stolt and had him sign my Flower Kings boxes and the rest of my discography, so that was excellent. From there, I ran up to our cabin, tossed my stuff into, my little cabinet, and changed out my Roina Stolt shirt in favor of something a little bit cooler, and went and watched Moon Safari from the main stage. If you don't know Moon Safari, my goodness, you've got to check them out. They are, I don't even know how to begin to describe them. It's kind of like Styx, especially their album Lover's End. It's kind of like the Beach Boys, but it makes me think of what's that Beatles song? I'm a Loser, I think, where it's like this toe-tapping, jangly kind of song, but it's these really like kind of depressing lyrics. That's how I feel about Moon Safari. They have these gorgeous, gorgeous, lush, multi-part vocal harmonies and really catchy choruses, but really just sad moments to it. And but that's what I love about them. They're a fantastic band, and I kind of weaved my way up to the very front for basically. I missed like the first 10 minutes of their set and caught the rest. And here's a clip from their song Constant Bloom, which is an a cappella piece, and it kicks off their album Bloomlied. And they always play it as an encore a cappella live after every show. Unfortunately, they have 2 lead vocalists, Peter Sandstrom and Simon Åkesson. And they didn't have Peter because I believe he just had a baby, or he and his wife did, or he and his partner did, and he couldn't attend Cruise to the Edge. But Moon Safari has been on every Cruise to the Edge, so they didn't miss this one. So it was 5 singers for Constant Bloom instead of 6.
Strange are the days, how they seem. magic or trick when by chance loving June gasps for air and calls out blue. Life, as is said, goes up and down. We walk through the door a second time around to do what was said but never done. We promise you gardens made of green, yet we're lost in this tune, just men of the moon. Let's sing for a world of constant bloom.
So the second half of day 4, again, some difficult choices to make. That night was a little bit dicey for me. I knew Pain of Salvation was coming up in Studio B, where I missed Flower Kings on day 2, and I knew I would have to make some sacrifices to get there. But before we get to that, we saw Alan Parsons' live project. That was the third of 3 headlining shows in the Royal Theatre. An amazing set. They were celebrating 40 years of the album Eye in the Sky. They also played songs from Tales of Mystery and Imagination, which is the Edgar Allan Poe themed debut album from Alan Parsons' project. And they played songs from Turn of a Friendly Card. Basically anything I could have wanted to hear, they played. In particular, they played the song Old and Wise, which is the end of Eye in the Sky, with a fantastic saxophone solo. And I'll admit, I got a little Niagara Falls in that moment because that sax solo just moves me every time I hear it. So probably some of the best audio we heard on the entire cruise. I would say, audio speaking, I would say Life Signs on day 5, Pain of Salvation on day 4, and Alan Parsons had the best audio of any set. Special nod to Rich Mauser for doing sound for Pattern Seeking Animals, and I'm guessing also Transatlantic, but those 3 were just fantastic. But Alan Parsons' project, of course, they're going to have fantastic audio. So that was a great show. That night, we made some changes to the schedule. Again, I can draw all over my schedule as much as I want, but inevitably there are going to be some changes made. And we did make some changes because of, we had already seen Fernando Perdomo and his Out to Sea band, so we made some other changes to allow us to see some more things. My wife went to go see Clone on the pool stage by herself. I had already caught a little bit of them on their first set, so I didn't catch this one. I went instead to see my friends in the band Nectar. Classic band. If you've never heard the album Remember the Future, go check it out. But they've been paying tribute to a lot of their classic stuff, A Tab in the Ocean, things like that. Their newest album, they played all of side 2 from that, or side B out of, I think, 4 sides. I've become friends with drummer Ron Howden over the years, as well as Derek Moore, the bass player. It was really kind of cool to see them. I saw their guitarist and vocalist Richie Schlanda in ProgJect 2018 in Rahway, New Jersey. Very cool to see him as well. So I watched Nectar from up front in Studio B, and unfortunately, talking about sacrifices that had to be made, I ended up skipping Riverside, which just seems unfathomable to me. I skipped Riverside so I could wait in line to see Pain of Salvation in Studio B. I've seen Riverside a number of other times. I've never seen Pain of Salvation. So again, it's that scales. So I went to see Pain of Salvation, sat right behind the soundboard, got great sound for that show. They were incredible. They played songs off of Panther. They played songs from In the Passing Light of Day. As of this recording, they're getting ready to play at Prog Power in Atlanta. They're going to be playing all of The Perfect Element at that as an exclusive. So they couldn't play all of it, but they did play some of it. They played, I believe, Used, if I remember correctly. Really just awesome. And by that point, I'd already run into Leo and Johan and Vikram. And I finally saw Daniel, who signed my stuff, as I mentioned earlier. and we talked all about seeing them and how great it was, and how much, you know, I've been a fan of theirs since 2003, and how it all started for me with Entropia, and how much I'd love to see exclamation point forward. It'll just always be my favorite Pain of Salvation song. Unfortunately, they didn't play that one, but I was still very, very happy with what they played. And as you might know, Daniel has had some recent health problems. That's what the album In the Passing Light of Day is about. And it's great to see him doing fantastically. And, you know, I think him telling his story with some of that material is more important than just playing the classic hits. So they had probably the best lighting of the cruise and equal to the best sound of the cruise. And it was just fantastic to see them. They're still on tour for a little bit longer. They're going to be playing in Prog Power shortly after this recording. They'll be there the first week of June. Go see them if you can, because there aren't too many chances to see Pain of Salvation. And that is how we ended night 4. All right, so on to day 5, the final day of the cruise before they kick us off on Saturday morning. To be totally honest with you, I've been cheat sheeting my way through this video and holding up my schedule as we go and just kind of referring to it. I've been trying to do it sneakily off camera. This day was such a kind of cluster that I'm going to just follow along as I talk about it. So day 5 rather, we were in Coco Key, which is Royal Caribbean's private island, as I mentioned. And we got an early start out there. We were docked next to another ship, so our view from the Windjammer Cafe where we had breakfast was the other ship. We were on the Mariner of the Seas, and we were docked next to the Symphony of the Seas. And it must be one hell of a symphony. So yeah, that's how we started our day. Nice big bowls of Frosted Flakes before we got out onto the island. And we went out there and snorkeled, as I mentioned earlier, and I thought it was hilarious. Just on a side note, my floaty thing for the snorkeling was called Aqua Lung. So I had my wife take a picture of me with Cruise to the Edge behind me while I'm wearing an Aqua Lung swimming accessory for Jethro Tull's Aqua Lung. The really funny part, though, is as we were getting back on the ship, Martin Barr, the longtime guitarist of Jethro Tull, was up on the pool stage. We could hear him from the dock. He had just started playing Aqua Lung as we were getting back on the ship. And I'm like, that's really funny. Like, you could not plan that in a million years. So we went out there, had a very nice day, had some steak carnitas and pork carnitas, and just kind of had a nice lunch out there, did some snorkeling. I'm not the strongest swimmer, so I just kind of floated around behind my wife. Plus, now that I realize, I was not feeling well, so breathing was not the easiest thing to do. So I just kind of half-assed it in the water that day. But so afterwards, we were done there. We had one thing to do. We went to go to the swimming pigs excursion, where they literally take us to an island of these pigs who just swim around. It's like the cutest thing ever. We have a place near us where we live called Goat Island, where these goats and peacocks live. And it's this very swampy, marshy area around that. And that's what this felt like. It felt like Goat Island in the Bahamas, which is a strange, strange thing. So they pitch apples out to the goats, to the pigs, and the pigs go out, they swim out to retrieve them, and as they swim back to like the keepers, they have you in the water and you like swim next to them, and they take your picture as you swim with the pigs. And then there's a station where they're like little kind of like more baby pigs, and they have them do the same thing, and you can grab them. Just don't put your fingers near their mouth, because that's a good way to lose a finger if you want. Pigs like to eat. But the baby pigs were a little bit safer to be around, so we got to hold some baby pigs. Funny thing is, I briefly spoke to Eddie Trunk from SiriusXM in line, told him how much I love that metal show from back in the day, and he was broadcasting all week long with Mike Portnoy as his co-host all through the week at the sports bar at the Royal Promenade. So it was cool to get to talk to Eddie Trunk for a minute as well. He's very gracious and appreciated me watching that metal show from back in the day. So we got off of Coco Key, back onto the ship as Aqua Lung was playing, and we got on there and cleaned up and everything. But unfortunately, because it was day 5, you have to start packing your bags, because if you don't want to have to carry your luggage off of the ship, which we did not want to because we already carried it onto the ship, you have to have it packed and outside of your stateroom by 10 o'clock at night. So knowing that we had all kinds of things going on that night, we instead packed quickly in the afternoon while Haken was playing. I'm sorry, Haken, but I'll see you soon. So while Haken was playing, we packed, set our bags outside, and then we went on about the rest of our day, and we saw Life Signs, which I've been a fan of Life Signs since their first album. Really got into them with Cardington, their second album, which I helped crowdfund, and really got into them with Altitude, which came out in 2021. It was my number 2 album of 2021. The song Altitude is my number 1 epic of 2021. Dave Bainbridge on the song Last One Home has probably my favorite guitar solo of 2021. And then the cello solo, the most beautiful cello solo on that song, Altitude, on the album of the same name. So they actually played all of that live for the first time in its entirety. They played all of the album, and the audio mix was perfect. You could hear every little detail, every nuance, every layer. Superb. I was 4 rows back in the Royal Theatre, so we had great sound. I could see everything pretty well from up close, and it's just amazing that 4 guys could pull off that amazing sound, that lush of a sound. But when you have 2 keyboardists and one of them can switch between keys and guitar and everything, there you go. But Life Signs, if you haven't checked them out yet, by all means, check out Altitude, check out Cardington. Even the first album is fantastic as well. And as far as Life Signs cellist, I have to give credit where credit is due. Her name is Juliette Wolf, and she's a fantastic classical cellist player. I actually play cello and grew up playing cello my whole life, so I can tell who's got good cello chops, and she does. So her cello solo on that is sublime. There's also a viola player, I think, on there at one point as well. So Altitude, chef's kiss. Good job to John Young and Dave Bainbridge and Zoltan and John in that band. So from there, there wasn't a lot of time left on the cruise. We ended up with what ended up only being our last show after that. I thought I had 2 more and ended up being 1 more. And I'll tell you about why in a second. We went and saw Dave Kerzner and his all-star prog band in Studio B. And that was the last show for me for Cruise to the Edge 2022. It was Dave Kerzner on keys and vocals, the McBroom sisters on vocals and backing vocals, Billy Sherwood from Yes on bass. We had Nick DiVirgilio on drums the entire time, and actually lead vocals at one point. Joe Denenzone on electric violin, Fernando Perdomo on guitar, double neck guitar as well. And let's see, Randy McStein came in at one point as a guest. And if you know, Randy's played with Dave extensively in the past, with Dave's solo stuff and in Continuum. And then we had Gabriel Agudo show up on lead vocals as well, taking up some of Simon Collins' parts from Sound of Contact pieces. And I think that was it. If I left anyone out, I apologize. But it was a pretty all-star prog band. And they actually covered, if you know of Kevin Gilbert, Dave and Nick DiVirgilio both played with Kevin in his Thud band back around 95, 96. And they actually played a Kevin Gilbert, Robert Ferris song from the Shaming of the True album, Water Under the Bridge. And that was my total Niagara Falls moment of the whole cruise. I was basically sobbing while filming that. I've become such a Kevin Gilbert fan, thanks to Dave, thanks to Nick, thanks to Mike Portnoy, actually, who's talked extensively about Kevin Gilbert over the years. So to hear that performed live by 2 of the guys who played with Kevin over the years was just, you can't touch it. It just doesn't get much better than that. We'll play a clip of that right now for you. Like I said, I was trying not to shake, trying not to sob while filming that, and just a very special moment for me. Maybe musically the most important moment of the whole cruise for me. It's between that and Transatlantic, I'd say. So fantastic set. I left there. I went to go wait in line for the Flower Kings, which was going to be the last show of the whole cruise with nothing else happening at that point. Also in Studio B, where we had the headache, where we couldn't see them on day 2. And I vowed not to miss the Flower Kings. But by that point, Dave Kerzner got started late because Pattern Seeking Animals earlier in the day got started late. So it's all cascading delays. And the Flower Kings got started late. It was 10:30 at night. I was in line, not realizing at the time that I had COVID, still dealing with the COVID coughs. I had to take a break there for a second because just talking this much is still just throwing me for a loop. You can tell my eyes are probably bloodshot from coughing so hard. But it'll be really nice when this is all hopefully a thing of the past, or at least even more manageable. But I digress. So I'd vowed to see the Flower Kings, didn't realize that I was dealing with COVID at that point. We drove to Port Canaveral, so I knew the next day I had at least an 8-hour drive. It ended up being a 10-hour drive with traffic, and we were one of the first 2 groups to be kicked off of the ship in the morning, so I knew I had to get some sleep. I waited for about half an hour. We still had another hour to go before the Flower Kings were slated to start. Roy Nastolt had lost his voice on the cruise, so I knew they wouldn't be performing at their best. And I just said, 10 years ago, I would have just grinned and bore it and just been exhausted the next day, maybe to a fault, maybe dangerously exhausted. I said, I'm getting older. I need to be more responsible. It's up to me to get us home. So after half an hour of waiting for the Flower Kings, I said, I gotta go. So I packed it in, went up to my room, and went to bed. And I missed the Flower Kings. 2 shows, I missed both. I planned on going to both, and I missed both. And it just breaks your heart. But when I got back, I ordered the Flower Kings DVD, Tour Kaput, which is from 2007, with Roy Nastolt, Hasse Froberg, Jonas Reingold, Thomas Bodin, and Pat Mastelotto on drums for that set. I ordered that when I got back. I hopped online and I found Meet the Flower Kings, and I watched that. And then there's even one other one from the Paradox Hotel days that I can still watch. So I've binged a lot of live Flower Kings to make up for it. And I promise, and this is going on record, if the Flower Kings come back to the US anytime, I'm going. That's my promise. Roy Nastolt, you can quote me on that. So that's how my cruise to the Edge ended up. Kind of sad. The next morning we took off, disembarked at about 7:30 in the morning, got to our car, and left town. Got home, and that was it. Cruise to the Edge was done. But I got to see a lot of great friends. Joel Barrios, my good friend and former editor-in-chief from Sonic Perspectives. Scott Medina, my former roommate from Prog Stock and former collaborator from Sonic Perspectives. Roy Avon, my former guest editor when I guest wrote at the Prog Report. And let's see, Maria, my friend Maria, good friend, holding down Prog in the Carolinas. I got to see all of my musician friends. I got to make new friends. I saw Vikram from Lux Terminus and Redemption and Pain of Salvation. I got to see Jimmy Keegan from Pattern Seeking Animals. I got to see Brian Peterson and Nick and Gus and all these great people who I've come to know and come to love through our shared affinity for progressive rock music. So the only thing I wanted to mention as we get ready to wrap up this episode, which if you're still watching, thank you for bearing with me with this mega episode, long form presentation. It won't be this much every single time, I promise. The only thing I wanted to mention is bands that I would love to see on a future Cruise to the Edge. Sort of our epilogue to this whole thing, looking ahead to future cruises to the edge. There are bands that I would love to see on this ship that have not been given a chance yet. A lot of bands have come back multiple times. A lot of them are fan favorites. That's great, and I love that. But I feel like some of them could be cycled out for one Cruise to the Edge to make room for new talent, new bands to be seen. Because you always hear from people who see Moon Safari for the first time. Bad example because they've been on every Cruise to the Edge, but they're like, wow, how have I never heard of these guys before? Or somebody who discovers Pattern Seeking Animals for the first time, or Marbin, or whomever. And I have a number, I have a list that I think people would just absolutely go bonkers over if they were to see some of these bands for the first time. First off, the band I Am the Morning from Russia, featuring Gleb Kolyadin on piano and Mariana Semkina on vocals and additional instrumentation. They're both, it's such a yin-yang relationship. The two of them balance each other out perfectly in this band. They both have amazing solo output on their own these days. Mariana has released a solo album and an EP, so has Gleb, and they're both at work on new things, I believe. But their solo or their band discography is where they really shine. They've worked with Marius before from Riverside. They've worked with Gavin Harrison before from Porcupine Tree and King Crimson, and they are just a fantastic band. They have a full band configuration that they could bring, or they could even just wow everybody as a duo of just Mariana and Gleb. And I think they would be phenomenal, 10 out of 10 on the cruise. In addition, from the band Beardfish, historically, he's now got his own solo project going very strongly, a band called Gungfly. It's a gentleman named Richard Sjöblom from Sweden, his band Richard Sjöblom's Gungfly, who are just outstanding. It's just 70s classic styled prog at its best. It's quirky, it's weird, it's melodic, it's heartbreaking. It's just so good. And I think Richard could just do a fantastic job. He can tour as a three-piece. He's done other configurations. I'm sure he would just be 10 out of 10 as well. In addition, originally hailing from France, now living, I believe, in Amsterdam, is the musician Frank Carducci. And he's got his own Frank Carducci wild, crazy shit band. It's just, you never know what you're gonna see. It's like Alice Cooper meets like Pink Floyd meets, I don't know. It's just, if you haven't listened to Frank Carducci, and that's Franck Carducci, you got to check him out. I love his stuff. I was a little hesitant to get into it, and then it just grabbed me and just latched on. And fantastic outpouring of work. He wears like a big top hat when he plays live. He almost looks like the Mad Hatter. And I don't mean Big Elf Mad Hatter. I mean a different Mad Hatter. He has that kind of persona about him. Big rock show. His partner in crime, Mary Raynaud, has like a disco ball, like sports bra top that she wears, like a theatrical, top. And she has laser LED finger lights that she aims at it, and it just goes, it's wacky. They are so much fun, and they could bring a lot of fun and great musicality to Cruise to the Edge. The band Fleesh from Brazil, they're a duo. And they've covered everybody from, oh my goodness, Marillion to Camel to Renaissance to Genesis to Rush, and they have an original output that is fantastic as well. It's dark, it's melodic, it's heavy. Fleesh, F-L-E-E-S-H, check them out as well. The band Leprous, I don't really even need to introduce them. They've toured with Haken, they've played Royal Albert Hall with Devin Townsend, they now have cellist Raphael Ryan Roth Brown playing cello with them. You can tell my voice is going. They are one of the best bands on the planet right now. Einar Solberg has performed with Haken, doing a vocal guest appearance. They would be outstanding as well. And of course, last but not least, Cruise to the Edge alumni Gazpacho, one of my favorite bands on the planet. They are just, everything they do is pure gold. They have recently released their album Fireworker, and their live album, Fireworking at Sunqua. And everything they've done from Night in 2007 until the present is some of the best music I've ever heard in my life. I am proud of my friendship with them. I am proud of everything they've accomplished as a band these past few years, and that they still keep going and still keep putting out such difficult and textured and layered and beautiful music. And I love everything they do. And they've been on, I believe it's Cruise to the Edge 2019. If I could ever be on a Cruise to the Edge that they are on, I would easily watch both sets from them. So there you have it. That is my mega episode, episode 1, Cruise to the Edge wrap up. I'm gonna go get a drink. You're probably not even watching anymore by this point, but you know, this is Prog we're talking. Might as well just start off with a fucking epic, go big or go home. Just go for it. So if you're still here, you're still watching, seriously, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. We'll have episode 2 out soon. I don't know what it's going to be about, but it's not going to be this long, and it's going to be a lot more fun and a lot less in depth. But this is Austin Kokel's Music Hotel. I am Austin Kokel, and I thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.